Tad Hargrave from Marketing for Hippies, and in the lead up for my Niching for Hippies program, I'm doing a series of interviews with colleagues, and today I've got one of my very favorite colleagues, Julia. And Julia, welcome, thanks for coming.
Anytime, of course, my pleasure.
So I was wondering if you'd love to maybe like to introduce yourself, just a bit about what you do, what your deal is.
Sure, yeah. So my work really is around business coaching for do-gooding entrepreneurs, and a lot of it, I started out, which it's so perfect that we're talking about niching. I started out really working with newbies in business, and it has since evolved into working with pretty established entrepreneurs who want to incorporate do-gooding practices into their established business. I have a lot of curiosity around how business can be an expression of who we are at our core, as well as what we really, really want. And so a lot of my work is centered around creating a prosperity path. So instead of it just being profit, it's around prosperity and creating strategies, encouraging my clients to create strategies that are through the lens of people, planet, and purpose. And so that's really what I'm playing a lot with right now, and there's still a lot more to come.
Cool. Um, so before this, I'd sent you some questions about your thoughts on niching, and I'd asked what you felt was missing in this whole conversation around niching. And you'd said a couple things. One of the things you said was interesting about the word niche having a meaning relating to a hole in a wall or something.
Yeah, totally, totally. It's my word nerd / architecture background that has me like, ooh, what's the origin of the word? But so I loved when I was first even looking at it for myself, developing my niche. The concept is that in very old buildings and old castles, there is this kind of enclave in a mass of a wall, and you could put decorative things there, but a lot of people would put their candles there. And something about the image of your business and yourself being this space in a mass, like carving out this space in this kind of massive wall to be placed and to kind of call your own, and that as a candle, you're illuminating something for your people, by taking that ownership of that space. You get to shed light in a way that you wouldn't be able to if you were just out in the room or anywhere else. And so there's that focus and that beautiful illumination that's possible by being in that wall and choosing that space. So that image just somehow made it so much easier for me. I think that niche can get so bogged down in like understanding what it is and how to find it, and there's this lightness that needs to be injected back into it. Like, it's okay, and it's a beautiful thing. Actually, it's a beautiful thing to be able to be choosing and creating.
Totally. I love that on the question of just like, what are you illuminating for your clients? I like that.
Right?
And one of the thoughts you'd had around niching was that by choosing a niche, you get to serve your clients in even more deep and catalytic ways. And I'm wondering if you can say more about that.
Yeah. And I think this is a big piece around niching that is missing from the conversation, or at least it has from the conversations I've been in, is that, yes, choose a niche that is really in alignment with who you are. And if you tell me that you're committed to running a business and you're committed to serving people, then you have to choose who you're serving. And by doing that, by choosing who you serve, there is depth and quality to what you're doing. So instead of this scattershot, I help everybody, it becomes focused. Like it's almost that focused illumination, but that you get to really, really serve people on such a deeper level because you know them better. I can't serve everyone in the world to the extent that I serve the do-gooding entrepreneur. It's just not possible because I know these people better than I know everybody in the world.
And,
yeah.
And one of the things you'd said too is how how it's so important in this conversation around niching, sort of that it's okay to give yourself permission to want to be around the people you want to be around. and to deeply serve the people you really, really want to hang out with, and that um, that doesn't mean that other people are less deserving, that they're wrong. It just means that you're honoring yourself more.
Hmm. And what you the honoring yourself more, it almost feels like we don't the permission and honoring ourselves, that there are people we're naturally drawn to and that
Yeah.
light us up, like we don't have to be surrounded by people who don't light us up. I don't know why it's such a novel concept for us to choose, to surround ourselves with people we love and who make the world turn. Um, but it is, and giving yourself permission to choose these people and say, I really want to be around these people. Like, these people are freaking awesome. I love them. I'm excited to help them. And it doesn't mean any judgment is placed on anyone outside of that circle, right? It's not like you hate all these other people or you're giving them the finger. It's that you're like, no, but I love these people. Which it does, I mean, like, I don't know when we're taught that. Like, I don't know what happens for us to be ingrained with the sense of inclusion, like we have to include everyone. And it might be that, like there is value in being inclusive. There's value in having diversity. And yet, when you run a business, there is a switch that wants to be flipped in terms of who you serve in order to be able to serve deeply. Does that make sense?
Totally. And it is interesting because it does feel like there's maybe it's we grow up in like family and we just have to be around our family even if we don't feel that connected to them, and some of us more than others, or it is interesting where it comes from. But there was a book I saw a friend of mine reading. It was called Mama Gina's Guidebook for Women or something like that, and her whole premise was for women being more powerful, the question to ask yourself is like, how can you bring more pleasure into your life? And how can you do things that give you more pleasure? And that so often it's like, well, yeah, I should help everybody. This sort of martyr complex that can happen, for men and women. But that question of like, what is it that's going to light you up in the kind of work that you do and who you want to be with? I think that it's so easy to not do that. But clearly a business is going to work better when we do. And you were saying that one of the biggest distractions you felt like was choosing your niche with your head. So I'm curious if you can.
Well, I love the bridge there because, like, I'm still stuck on the word pleasure. Like, I totally love the word pleasure, which is so not. I mean, definitely in the United States, in a lot of cultures, the ethic is hard work is the way. That's the only way to go. And we miss out on so much pleasure and the value of pleasure and the value of finding out what we love because we're allowing what we are pleased by to lead the way. And so that bridge of, for me, choosing with your heart, right? Like your heart knows pleasure. Your heart knows when it's lit on fire. Your heart also knows when it's like stomped into the ground. But we're not going to choose, specifically when you feel your heart being stomped into the ground, don't choose those people. Choose the ones that light it on fire and fill it, And I think there's that distraction of our head. We're so used to valuing what our head has to say. And there's a lot of value in our head. And choosing a niche, choosing people that you love, that's not a head project. Right, that's a heart project.
So how would you support somebody in that if they were like, yeah, I feel like I'm too stuck in my head with my niche? How would you support them in finding and uncovering their niche in a way that wasn't in their head?
I love that. So sometimes it just takes sitting with, so let's just, you sit with a niche. Like, let's say you choose skateboarders. You just choose this one niche that feels appropriate, right? And so actually sitting with it, closing your eyes, getting out of your head, and anytime you hear something and you can tell that it's coming from up top, that's, a good sign of head. If you think it's a smart decision, then that's a head one. And really feeling into your body. We have so much wisdom in the way our body communicates to us, and we don't listen. And so asking, like just dropping down and then really imagining yourself dropping down somewhere else outside of your head. Hold the term skateboarders. So I'm holding skateboarders. And I feel because skateboarders, although I kind of love them, but because it's not a niche for me, I personally feel constriction. So note what you feel,
Yeah.
where you feel it. If it's constricting, if it's binding, if it's heavy, those are really good indications that that is not the niche for you.
So it should feel kind of freeing and light and exciting when people really sit with it.
Yeah, like, and all the scary, you know? There's like almost a scariness of like, do I dare? Like, do I really get to work with those people? Do I really get to, jump in that boat and say that these are my people? It's kind of a little nerve-wracking to do it when it's done properly. And what's also coming to me that's really, I think, crucial is the difference between demographics and psychographics.
Right. Yeah.
So
This has been coming up in so many of the conversations. It's great. What's your take on it?
It's, oh my God, I'm huge about this, actually. So my clients are 26 to 70. They're men, they're women, they are all over the world, completely diverse in all terms of demographics. And I'm very happy about that because I worked really hard on understanding the psychographic. Like, what's the vision that's drawing them? What's the emotions that they want? What are the ideas that they like to connect on and talk about? Just really getting clear about who they are. And one of those pieces is, so when I was like, oh, skateboarders, like I love them, some of them, and some of them I hate. So skateboarders is a demographic. It's not a really useful one because within that demographic, there is a wild array of mentalities. And so choosing the mentalities that are really alive. And so for me, there's, spiritually conscious or very, very curious, educated in a way that is out maybe in school, but outside of school. They're just so curious about life and learning more. They love to travel. Freedom is a huge value, a huge aspect of what they're after. And so understanding them in terms of what they believe in and what they want in the world, that psychographic is much more compelling to me. But it requires work, right? Like, so it requires meeting enough of them and putting yourself in positions to meet people and either constrict or expand and get excited. And noticing, like taking note, what are the threads that all of these people whom I love share? Because they don't all share all the same threads, right?
Yeah.
There's very, very disparate people within my group who, like, I know that once they start talking about certain things, spirituality, entrepreneurship, world changing, those kinds of things, I know that they'll come together. If they talk about child rearing or
right.
Vegetarianism, who knows where the conversation's going to go. It might go in the same direction, but those ones I don't have as much, control over a great sense of.
Yeah, it is interesting because then I find like my own understanding of who my sort of ideal clients or niche are has expanded. Like, I'm definitely more political than New Age, I would say. And so I just noticed the clients that light me up the most are like the permaculture folks, the folks who are doing work in their communities. They have some political analysis that seems to come out as they talk. I get really excited working with those people. And when people are sort of fully New Age and it's all about energy and there's almost a denial or unwillingness to look at the situation in the world, I feel this kind of pullback. But that just has taken time to notice who I feel drawn to and who I don't. And then it's interesting because then that awareness is like filtered back into my website, and I'm sure will increasingly filter into my offerings.
Yeah.
And then that further clarifies like my website, my message, my sales letters, which then further draws those people more strongly to me because they can see themselves in it. But yeah, it's so important to, what is it that lights us up? Like, who are we around? And whenever we're around them, we're just like, oh, so excited to take their call. I'm so excited to work with them. And I'd asked you for some examples of niche businesses, and you'd come up with give something back. Office supplies is one of them. Can you talk about that and why you think it's such a great niche business?
Well, what I love about them, and it's that political, like I interviewed Mike, one of the co-owners and co-founders, and that they were specific in terms of wanting to change their community because of the business that they started. And they found a niche that needed help and that needed, some kind of change. And that was office supplies, which felt like the most kind of ridiculous way for a do-gooder to be affecting change in a community. I mean, it's just like, what the fuck are you talking about here? And so what I love about the niche is that the branding and the niching are always just so, beautifully aligned, but that the big ideals, the political activism, the wanting to make a difference gets to take a form of whatever actually is going to work for them in business, right? So a hard decision sometimes is, what is my niche? And so that's kind of why I chose them, is that, office supplies isn't the natural progression.
What do they do exactly? I'm just confused by what the...
They're a B corporation. So they literally do sell office supplies. Like their competitors are Office Max and like those kinds of businesses.
Right.
They're one of the biggest office supply companies in California. And because they're a B corporation, the way that they've set up is that they're also one of the biggest donations, corporate donors in all of California. They have community, all of their money, so 10% gets donated, and actually it's gone up. I mean, it varies in percentage. I think the last time I talked to them, it was like 70% of their profits get donated to the community, and the workers, as well as all of the people who shop there, have equal votes in where the money goes to, and it all stays local to that particular store. So each store has their own money that they get to invest locally. And so what I love about it's boring, right? Like, it's office supplies. Like, this doesn't sound really world changing. But what I like about them is that they just kind of like rubber meets the road. They've been at it for 20 years or so, and it's been making huge change. And sometimes that's what it is to choose a niche, right? Like, sometimes you just have to choose one and move forward and see what happens and how much good you can do through that niche.
Yeah. And what would you say, who are the... So it seems, I mean, like, the position they're occupying is within office supplies, they're doing a very ethical, community-based approach, which nobody else has been doing. And do you have a sense of who they appeal to? Like, what kinds of people want to shop there, or?
They're the do-gooder entrepreneurs, right?
Right.
I mean, they have the perfect setup being in the Bay Area, but also interesting. I used to be an architect in the Bay Area, and I've spoken to a few firms who do not have traditional do-gooding as a leading thing, but they still shop from them because there's this values alignment that they're really drawn to. Yeah. They might not understand it completely, but they're like, well, why wouldn't we shop from them? Why would we go to Office Max? Which I find really compelling. That innate heart aspect shows up in the business in some way, regardless of the niche.
Yeah. The second one you'd said was the Just Great Foods from a Conscious Kitchen.
Another one I love, and I realize now, I'm like, why did I choose these ones? Right before we started talking about this, you talked about your own business and the evolution of, like, there was you could serve the world, and then you can serve hippies, and then you can serve, the politically active hippies who are doing these things. And so there's this narrowing and clarification as your work goes on, and the evolution becomes more and more clear.
All right. So the second niche business you were talking about was Just Great Foods from a Conscious Kitchen, it's called?
Yes. And so I don't know how much we got into, but what I'm really loving about her is that she started as a nutrition coach, right? So there's that broad niche that it still takes, like, she could have gone into personal training, or she could have gone into wellness. I mean, there's so many different aspects. So just choosing, nutrition coach. Okay, so she's choosing food. And then as her business has gone on, her father got really, really sick. She's in the hospital reading what is in the feeding tube of this stuff that's supposed to be keeping him alive. And it's all chemicals, sugar, just crap. I mean, there's like most of it you can't even pronounce what it is. So at this moment of this is not how it can be. And so her business now, she created something called functional formulas, and that has exploded. That aspect of her business has exploded, and that's pretty much, the vast majority of what she does. And so without her having chosen the nutrition route, because, there's so many different aspects of wellness, she chose nutrition. She got into it for a while, was doing it, sees this other aspect that needs a response, and then gets more and more specific, and then, continues to evolve her business in that way. And what I also really love about it is that her niche itself still has some room to breathe, right? Like she has a brand underneath her niche, which is this food, but she has room to breathe in other products. She could write a book, she could create other programs, all of these other things are kind of open.
I love it. And you were you'd said also, like, is it cheating to say you for marketing for hippies? And
I did.
Yeah, I'm curious what your take is on my niche, or what's your
expression? Succinct. So when something is simple, usually a lot of thought went into it, right? And so marketing is very specific even within business coaching.
Right.
And choosing that as your thing. So that's a beautiful call. That's a call to what we're going to actually be focusing on. And Hippies is the psychographic. Like there isn't like a, we are hippies. Like you have to recognize yourself in the word hippie in order to know that you're for them.
Right.
Does that make sense? And so I love like marketing for like, how short can you make it? How succinct? How beautiful? Like that means that you really put a lot of thought into it and created something that is really has a lot of profundity without having to get like crazy and wordy and use the word profundity.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah. I really like the name too. So do you have any...
I sure should hope so.
Do you have any last thoughts in terms of if somebody was like, how do I find my niche? How do I go about this? Where do I even kind of start with it? What would you say?
It's interesting. So I think we've touched on the point a bit of, who do you love? And thinking about events that you would want to go to, or conferences or parties or festivals where you would want to be, and really give yourself space and room to understand what it is about those people that you want to surround yourself with.
That's a good way.
Well, I think that opened up for one. I can't remember who said this to me, but all marketing is talking to people you love about things you love to talk about. And so I was like, I need to just talk to the people I love. And I don't find them at, e-women conference network meetings. I find them at all these other places. And so that all of a sudden opened up like, people I love.
That's cool. I really like that. Just, that's a nice backdoor into the whole conversation of like, what are all the events that you'd like to go to? And then what is it about the people at those events? Because it's usually the people at the events that draw you.
Right.
That's great. Well, I think that's it. So if people want to find out more about you and your work, where should they go and what should they do?
The best place to go is beinvigorated.com. So I'm sure there'll be a link. I won't spell it out. And sign up. I don't really do regular newsletters, but I do fun events and interviews and things like that. And I'm into doing big fun things for free. So if you want to do some of those kinds of events, find me there.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining, and it was really a pleasure to talk to you, and I totally got a couple great things out of this, so that's awesome. And thanks everyone for joining. If you want to check out the Niching for Hippies thing, it's nichingforhippies.com. and we'll see you in the next video.